Okay. Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. So we'll jump right into it here. The calls, I'm going to do my best to try and keep them at 20 to 30 minutes unless there's a lot of questions, so that it doesn't end up being this long deal. I want to try and bring you as much value in as much time as possible, knowing that everybody's got busy lives and busy days and things like that. So in terms of what I'll talk about on these calls, as it relates to health topics, I'll try to keep it short and to the point. Like I always say, my objective with the calls is to just try and bring you guys information that helps you to think outside the box a little bit, and helps you to become more knowledgeable and more conscientious of your health and your well-being and the things that maybe you're not aware of, that you can obviously investigate on your own through the stimulation of these calls, hopefully, or make changes as necessary. So anyway, before I get started, as always, I just want to find out if there's any immediate questions that I can answer from anybody prior to talking about the reflux drugs, the heartburn drugs here today. So any questions, I'll go ahead and take those now. Okay. So what I really want to just kind of go over is this recent information that has come out on heartburn drugs, and over-the-counter and prescription both. And and always we're really working to educate all of our clients and people about the pharmaceutical drugs that they take or the over-the-counter drugs that they take with consistency. It seems like we've sort of developed into this culture that as soon as we have a sniffle or we feel something or whatever, we go straight for the drugs and we start taking drugs to try and mask or treat the symptoms. So I'm not here to tell you to not do that. And I'm certainly not here to tell you to stop any drug that you've been prescribed that you're taking currently. I always try to make that very clear. That's not my job. My job is ultimately to help people get healthy so that the need for synthetic drugs disappears. Because as many of you already know, drugs are really just used to treat symptoms, which there's nothing wrong with treating symptoms. The issue is that if you don't get to the root of the cause, then typically the need for the drug never disappears. So that being said, don't take anything I say as advice to stop any of your drugs. That's up to you, or that's between you and your physician that prescribed the drug. All I want to do is try to get you information that helps you to think differently about it, or to look into other options that maybe you're not aware of. So in terms of heartburn, heartburn, as you may know, it doesn't affect your heart. It's not a heart issue, but it's rather an issue that's associated with your esophagus, which is the area that basically connects your oral cavity to your stomach. Okay, it's obviously located in the area of your heart. So when you develop reflux issues, you can get burning sensations in your chest, and you may even experience sort of a sour taste in your mouth from that acid that's coming up, okay? Now, for some people, of course, it can last for minutes. For others, it can last for hours or, days even. But the key to understanding this is, and of course, what most of you have been told if you've had it or if you're experiencing it, is that depending upon the frequency of it, of course, it can over time create problems if you don't address the real issue, right? So it can lead to inflammation of the esophagus, and if it's something that's chronic over a long period of time, obviously it can begin to create ulcerations in the esophagus, which could lead to more serious issues, the worst of which could be esophageal cancer, of course, right? So you want to do everything you can to stop this from being an issue. So one of the most common drugs that people are prescribed or that they take over the counter are called proton pump inhibitors, okay, PPIs. And some of these drugs, like I said, you can get over the counter, like Prilosec as an example, Prevacid. I think Nexium is even over the counter now. And then the others are prescribed drugs. Omeprazole is an example, propranozole, the drugs that are going to end in ZOLE are going to be, the prescription drugs that are going to end in that ZOLE are going to be your typically the ones that most people are being prescribed now. Okay, so just if you want to know that and you're not sure if you're on one or not. So so these drugs are pretty easily accessed by people, whether, like I said, it's prescribed or it's over the counter. But what we've actually found out here, and in the not too recent past, is that these drugs have been associated with chronic kidney disease, which has sometimes led to kidney failure. Okay, and so that's something that we obviously want to take note of, especially if we're a person that has had reflux issues. Okay, so what happens is when you obviously eat, you chew food. So the process of digestion actually begins when we chew our food. And so I always tell people, you want to chew your food. Don't take 2 bites and then swallow, because you're making it harder for your stomach to digest these big chunks to ultimately move into the small bowel, where further digestion occurs and ultimately absorption of the key nutrients and minerals and things like that your body needs. So chewing is very important. Okay. So when you obviously chew and then swallow your food, the food travels through the esophagus, and then it enters the stomach by the lower esophagus opening up a little sphincter, okay, this esophageal sphincter. And it's kind of like a gate, okay? So when you swallow food, it moves through the esophagus, the gate opens, and the food empties into the stomach, okay? Now, there's some things that can lead to weaknesses of that sphincter, or that gate, if you will. And then on top of that, sort of based on a lot of stuff that we've talked about in the past in terms of the types of foods that people eat, in terms of refined or processed foods, refined oils, lots of sugars, artificial sweeteners, things like that, you can start to get digestive issues that will develop. And if you've used a lot of NSAIDs over the years, aspirin, ibuprofen, Aleve, Tylenol is actually not an NSAID, but at any rate, those types of drugs can start to create challenges with digestion. So it's an accumulation of things over time that begin to affect this process. And so what will happen is you'll start to get stomach contents that will reflux. In other words, they'll move backwards up through that sphincter and into the esophagus. Now, the stomach is made for a really, really, really acidic environment. Okay, and that's where, once again, these proton pumps are producing this hydrochloric acid to help with this digestive process. And I'll tell you right now, just as a side note, is that having an extremely acidic bolus within your stomach is really, really important to not only your digestion but your overall health. It's a big part of our immune system. When you look at the gut as a whole, the gut is a big, big player in immune function. Okay, and by the way, it's also a big player in our emotional health too. We talk a lot about the gut-brain connection and the enteric nervous system being sort of the second brain, okay? So when people have digestive problems, not only can they develop symptoms like heartburn, but they could also develop symptoms that they wouldn't even associate at all with digestive dysfunction, such as anxiety disorders, depression, sleep problems, fibromyalgia type symptoms because of the leaky gut issues that develop. So, but those are the sort of things that can happen in addition to these reflux type problems over time. Okay, so when you get a challenge with acid production within the stomach, or you get weakening of that sphincter and food begins to reflux into the esophagus, well, obviously you can start to develop burning, within the esophagus. Okay. And there are foods that maybe some of you have identified that potentially make the burning a little bit worse, but that's pretty much oftentimes associated with that food in terms of what it creates in the body versus acidity or not being acidic. So, but what are proton pump inhibitors? Okay. So proton pump inhibitors are the drugs that we often take orally to reduce the production of acid in your stomach. In other words, what they do is they turn off the acid-producing cells within your stomach. Okay. Now, the problem with that is, once again, like I said, is that, believe it or not, the majority of times what we find is that people that have reflux problems, have acid reflux problems, is that they actually have what's called hypochlorhydria. In other words, they have too little acid production, okay? Now, when you have too little acid production, you're going to get slowing of the digestive process from the stomach into the small bowel. And when that process slows and you're not getting good emptying of the stomach, and then you also are a person that is, let's say, leptin resistant, where you tend to overeat, because leptin resistance ultimately leads to overeating because the satiety centers of the brain are not shut off. And leptin is produced by the adipose cells, the fat cells of the body, which that's the beautiful thing about this program is we're going to break through leptin resistance ultimately and improve leptin sensitivity, which is going to shut down this need to want to eat. And that's why a lot of you that have maybe gotten towards the end of the program, have completed the program, whatever it is, you're full when you eat because your body is now, not only is it getting nutrient-dense food again because you've eliminated what we call dietary crack, you've gotten rid of the artificial sweeteners, you've eliminated the neurotransmitter and hormonal disruptors that have ultimately screwed up the chemistry of your body, and you've improved leptin sensitivity, insulin sensitivity, you've got hormone receptor healing that's happening. Your body is now satiated, so it tells you that, okay? And also what's really cool is your cravings change, and you go to craving, fruits and vegetables and healthier foods now because your body wants that stuff, and you've broken that bad food cycle. So, but until that digestion improves, you're not getting good emptying of the stomach, and ultimately what happens is it'll move backwards. So there's a combination of things that can begin to happen, okay? And obviously, even if there's too little acid within the stomach, too little acid in the stomach is still way too much for the esophagus. And so you're going to get ultimately the backup of that, of the stomach contents through that weakened esophageal sphincter, and you're going to start to develop burning within the esophagus, okay? And so that's sort of how this process happens. Now, there's other people that have come out and talked about H. pylori bacteria in terms of being a part of this process, and that they found H. pylori in the area of gastric ulcers and esophageal ulcers and upper small bowel ulcerations. And actually, somebody was even awarded that big gigantic award. It'll come to me here, but anyway, they got it for this H. pylori thing, and my brain goes to, when I think about bacterial infections, because the theory that bacteria cause disease, the germ theory, is that it's a theory. It's not a law. Like gravity is a law. In other words, if you hold an apple and you let go of it, it's going to drop and hit the ground. That's the law of gravity. The germ theory is a theory. In other words, stating that germs cause disease. Well, how I think about it is that if you have a body that's amplified in terms of its ability to deal with outside stressors, which is what we learn in our textbooks that we study from, then the body can typically, when the body is amped, in other words, its immune system is working on a high level, it has a very good opportunity to battle really anything that comes in. And there's plenty of documented cases of this happening. And so as an example, let me just put it this way to you. When you think about bacterial overgrowth, a lot of times the bacteria that quote-unquote cause urinary tract infections or cause strep throat or whatever it is, guess what? Those are bacteria that we actually need in order to survive. You see, 99.5% of the bacteria that are in our body are what we call, they live in a symbiotic relationship with us. We need them and they need us, okay? So when you start to get diseased tissue or tissue that becomes injured or damaged from reflux like this, then there has to be something that comes in there to try to clean up this sick and diseased tissue. And so you're going to have bacteria that are in these areas of these sick or diseased tissue which are going to begin to proliferate. It's kind of like having garbage in your garbage can in the backyard. Flies are attracted to garbage. So the flies are going to come and eat up all this excess garbage, and there might be a lot of those flies until you get that garbage cleaned up, right? So, just think about it this way, is that if you take a garbage can and put it in your backyard, and you fill it up with all of your food leftovers for a week or 2 weeks, and then you take another one that's brand new from Home Depot and you set it in your front yard and it's got nothing in it, which one's going to attract flies? Well, obviously the one in the backyard will. And if you want to treat it, based upon how we, in my opinion, how we've gone in terms of, issues with people's health is that we go and we buy this really strong insecticide and we spray our garbage to try and kill flies. And you know what? That insecticide kills a lot of flies, but it doesn't kill all of them. We come back in 2 days and there's still flies on there, and there's more flies now. So we spray them again with the insecticide. That kills some. We come back a couple of days later, the flies are still there. We go get a stronger insecticide. We spray again, and I'll be darned if that one isn't working the way that we thought it would, and the flies are there. Well, the obvious answer is clean up the garbage and get rid of it, okay? So when you think about your health and your well-being, that's how you want to begin to think, is you want to go, okay, how do I get myself cleaned up? How do I get my body working again so that these bacteria don't grow out of control and, start to eat up this diseased tissue, okay? So, so that's when you look at, reflux and you look at all the things that can come from it, this is how people begin to move down this road of, being on one drug, 2, 3, 4. So in this particular case, if we're going to use a proton pump inhibitor to help alleviate the symptoms of reflux, I'm not saying don't do that, but what I'm saying is that you want to start actually going after the real issue, okay? And so there's things that we want to begin to do to amplify function, because these authors that published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, what they did is they started gathering data, and what they found is that they speculate the rise in the numbers of individuals diagnosed with chronic kidney disease in the past years can be attributed to the increased number of people using proton pump inhibitors to treat acid reflux. This rise is faster than would normally be expected from known risk factor trends such as high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes. The lead author, his name was Benjamin Lazarus, and wrote in this study that we note that our study is observational and does not provide evidence of causality. However, a causal relationship between PPI use and chronic kidney disease could have a considerable public health effect given the widespread extent of use. More than 15 million Americans used prescription PPIs in 2013, costing more than $10 billion, okay? Study findings suggested that up to 70% of these prescriptions are without indication, and that 25% of the long-term PPI users could discontinue therapy without developing symptoms. So this is pretty important information for you to understand, especially if you're someone that's on there, okay? Because a lot of people are taking these over-the-counter, and here's what they noted with these over-the-counters. In the study, the authors noted that the increased risk of chronic kidney disease with proton pump inhibitors was associated with the use of the drug and not the underlying cause of the heartburn, okay? So, another class of drugs, histamine 2 receptor antagonists, which are also used to treat GERD, may be something that you would want to look into instead, because these histamine 2 receptors did not show a similar association with the increased risk of chronic kidney disease, okay? Now, what they talk about here in terms of use of these drugs is, to obviously follow instructions, but no one really, when people take a drug as an example, most people do not take it in a recommended dose amount. For example, if you go read your recommended use time for your common over-the-counter drugs and then ask yourself, is that how I typically use them? Most people would say no. They're using them pretty consistently. As an example, Aleve for osteoarthritic discomfort in their knees or hips or lower or spine or something like that, when there's potentially other things that can be done, okay? And why is that important? Well, in May of 2010, the FDA mandated a high-risk warning for fracture, as an example, be placed on these bottles of proton pump inhibitors, okay? So the greatest risk was associated with people who took the highest dose for a year or more. The one thing is that they recalled the safety warning on over-the-counter proton pump inhibitors because they were marketed for intended use of 14 days and not on a long-term basis. Hey, can you mute your phone if you just came on, please? please mute your phone if you just came on. Please, thank you. So the FDA recalled the safety warning on over-the-counter prescription, over-the-counter proton pump inhibitors because they were marketed for intended use of 14 days and not a long-term basis. Well, the problem is that most people that are getting over-the-counter proton pump inhibitors are taking them way more than 14 days, okay? But they still took this warning off of the over-the-counter drugs. They left it on the prescription ones, okay? So what are the potential health conditions that are linked to proton pump inhibitors? B12 deficiency, magnesium deficiency, which, by the way, in the magnesium deficiency, if it happens from these, what they're seeing is the symptoms or the magnesium deficiency doesn't appear that it's being alleviated by taking an oral magnesium supplement, okay, which indicates that it's creating other problems functionally. Iron deficiency, increased risk of pneumonia, increased risk of fracture, which we already mentioned, and increased risk of heart attack. All right, that's kind of interesting. All right, why? Because what's happening is the PPIs, these antacids, are reducing the amount of nitric oxide in the walls of our blood vessels. And nitric oxide is a vasodilator. It actually helps our vessels to open up when necessary. So if they don't open, right, if you don't have good nitric oxide content, then you're going to have potentially constriction within the vascular walls, the vascular tree, and that creates pressure problems, which ultimately begins to affect the heart, and this becomes this issue over time. Okay, so what's the answer? Well, ultimately, it's to get away from just treating the symptom and ultimately, figure out the cause or get to the cause, okay? So we mentioned earlier this idea behind the bacteria H. pylori, Helicobacter H. pylori, and the association it has with gastritis and, ulcerations and all that sort of stuff. Well, like I said earlier, my feeling is that if we get the environment cleaned up, we get people off of all the sugars, all the artificial sweeteners that they're using, all the refined oils that they use, the processed foods that people are gobbling up in excess these days, and start to fill them with good food, like real food and not food-like substances, and we start to get things improved from an anti-inflammatory perspective, we begin to support digestion, then we can begin to see these things heal, okay? So if you feel like H. pylori is an issue for you because of what you've done, there's something that we recommend called allicin, and this is just allicin is really allicin, which is the fractionated portion of garlic. And what people have been told typically in the past is garlic is an antibiotic. It's not an antibiotic. How allicin works, how this stuff works, allicin, is it's actually what we call a biofilm buster. It breaks biofilms, okay? And the thicker the biofilm on a bacteria, the more resistant it becomes to antibiotics, or the more difficult it is to kill, right? So MRSA is a very strong bacterial infection which has a very thick biofilm. So allicin helps to break biofilm so ultimately your immune system can kill it, all right? And that's why that stuff works so well. So allicin is something that you can use to help support this process if you need to. The nucleoimmune helps to support immune function within the body. So nucleoimmune and allicin are just two easy things that I tell people. Just keep them in your wellness cabinet. Those things work phenomenal. So the nucleoimmune, if you feel like you're getting a little sniffle or, the flu's coming on or something like that, then you grab that nucleoimmune and you start taking one capsule every waking hour for 24 to 48 hours, and I'll be darned if the majority of the time it doesn't just knock it right out, because it helps your body it supplements your body's production of these nucleotides, okay, which are really vital, because as we get sick, they become depleted really fast, and it can take 6 to 7 days for your body to replace them and get you over it. So boom, when you add the nucleoimmune, you get these nucleotides high, the body begins to attack, and bam, and all of a sudden you're better, okay? So the nucleoimmune and the allicin are great products to have in your wellness cabinet, but when we start talking about reflux disease, what I'll tell people is, and many of you have already told us that my reflux is gone. Since I've started this program, my reflux is gone. Well, that's because the pink salt that you're using alone is going to help to increase acid production within the gut, okay? That product has over 93 trace minerals alone in it. Now, 83 of them are involved in this fat-burning process. But that pink salt is such great stuff that I just tell people don't think of it as salt. I mean, most people think of salt, they think of white table salt, which, yes, don't use white table salt ever again. It's not good for you. But this pink salt, think of it more as a mineral supplement. But the pink salt's going to help to increase acidity in the gut. Using the Bragg's apple cider vinegar after meals, drinking that 1 to 2 tablespoons and 3 to 5 ounces of water after your meals is going to help to increase acidity. And then, of course, I use hydrochloric acid after every meal. So I'll take HCl with my Hydrovitalize and something called Premier Digestase after every meal, okay, after every big meal. If I have an apple for a snack or, something like that, I don't take it. But after I eat lunch, after I eat dinner, I'm taking my Digestase, my HCl, and my Hydrovitalize, okay? You can take the HCl activator with that too, but the good news is the Hydrovitalize, how we've reformulated it, actually works as a great HCl activator also. But those things I just take every day as a part of my, my routine with my meals. Why? Because like I said earlier, HCl is such a vital part of good breakdown within the stomach and ultimately good emptying and preparing the nutrients and foods to be broken down further once they get into the small intestine to ultimately be absorbed by the body and utilized in the rebuilding of the cells within my body. And on top of that, having a good acidic gut protects you. So think about it this way. If you've ever seen an animal on the side of the road eating roadkill, those animals don't get sick from an animal that's been dead on the side of the road for days because their guts are so acidic. I mean, they eat something, and if they eat a piece of roadkill and it's got a fly that laid eggs on it with that could develop maggots. Sorry to be gross, but they'll bring it into their body. They'll eat it and bring it into their body. Their guts are so acidic that bam, it just kills it. Okay, or it kills bacterial overgrowth that's on that meat or whatever. Okay, well that's kind of how I want to know when I eat something. If I go to a restaurant and I eat a piece of seafood that someone didn't take care of appropriately or it sat out too long, that I've got a good chance of killing whatever's on it and it doesn't make me sick. So hopefully that makes sense. So there's a couple of reasons why I do that. Actually, there's multiple reasons. Another one is that you want to have good acidity so that ultimately you get good mineral breakdown and mineral absorption. And many of you have heard us talk about the mineral deficiencies that you have, and those mineral deficiencies are a big part of cell dehydration and decreased cell function. And so I want to make sure that I get good mineral breakdown so that I ultimately get good mineral absorption. So there's a lot of reasons to have good acidity within your stomach. Okay, so when you look at how to take care of this reflux issue naturally, like I said, oftentimes increasing HCl supplementation to deal with the hypochlorhydria problem is going to be a big supporter. If you're one of those people who starts taking hydrochloric acid and it irritates your stomach, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to stop the HCl and bring in something called Gastroven, because the Gastroven is going to increase the stomach energy, okay? And poor stomach energy, because remember, we're looking at improving we're looking at improving the physical substance of the body, but also improving the energy of the body. And that's what you and I are, is we're energy and we're physical substance. And when you get interferences to the energy within the body, it's going to also potentially create some problems. So if we've had people that when they take the HCl, it irritates their stomach. It makes their stomach hurt. So what we do is we stop them on the HCl. We get them on the Gastroven. And the Gastroven, very simply, what you do is you heat up water. You boil some water, and then you open up that water. You open up the capsule of Gastroven and you dump it in that boiling water so that it steeps for 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. Stir it up, and then you just drink it down, okay? So that's how you do that. You do that for about 10 to 14 days. That usually takes care of it, and boom, you can bring the HCl back in, and you're off and running and feeling really good. If you've got some ulcerations, or some issues like that, like I said, the Antacids can work really, really well along with the nucleomune. But also you can use something called Aloe Pro. The aloe is great aloe vera juice to help coat and begin to heal the digestive lining. So that stuff works phenomenally well also, okay? Ginger root, you could do it sort of the same way that I talked about with the Gastroven. You basically cut up a couple of slices and put it into a cup of hot water. Boil some water, and then same thing, you let it steep. It's a little thicker, so you're going to have to let that ginger steep for about 30 minutes before you drink it, okay? But you would want to drink that, about 20 to 30 minutes before you eat. So that can be beneficial in terms of the ginger, okay? We've talked about the Bragg's apple cider vinegar. That stuff's great. Vitamin D can be very beneficial in these sources, but vitamin D, we're going to wait until we're in phase 4. Good fermented foods. You want to get in the habit of eating fermented foods. Sauerkraut, as an example. Even pickles, but make sure if you eat pickles that there's no added sugar to them, okay? So you don't want anything with added sugar. You want to eat a pickle that doesn't have added sugar, okay? But fermented foods are phenomenal for helping your digestive system. They've got a lot of great probiotic support to them, okay? So, all right, and then obviously, I'm going to say this, and I'll end on this, is you definitely, and you're all doing this that are on the program or have finished the program, is you're staying away from processed foods, you're staying away from sugars, you're staying away from these bad refined oils, these things that are contributing to major imbalances in your body and ultimately creating substantial digestive microbiome disturbances, okay? We got to fix that microbiome and make it better, because these ultimately will promote, the good of good. They'll actually contribute to the pathogenic, development of bad, the bad microbiome. We want to get it back in balance, okay? So good organic, whole, real food. The supplements that we have at our offices are obviously whole food and live source. They're phenomenal. There's no excipients or crap in there. It's all good stuff, okay? But that's really it. It's pretty darn simple once you begin to understand this, okay? And the other thing, just I'll mention this last thing before I finish, is that when you have a decrease in hydrochloric acid, okay, this is important to understand, because when your hydrochloric acid content is down, it's actually going to diminish the flow of bile from the gallbladder, okay? And, poor hydrochloric acid production in your stomach is always going to be associated with poor biliary function, okay? So if you're a person that's had problems with your gallbladder, or even you've had your gallbladder removed now because of it, but you gotta understand that everything is sort of connected. And when you have bad, gallbladder dysfunction or biliary dysfunction, usually you're going to see symptoms of, gallstones or, something like that, but you're going to see loss of appetite, especially for meats, as an example. You'll have a frequent sour taste in your mouth a lot of times. You'll have infrequent bowel movements, or constipation is going to be more of an issue for you. And your stools may be a little bit light colored, unfortunately when it's starting to get bad. And then also, which is common for people, is you'll have a lot of gas, or you'll feel bloated, or just a general abdominal discomfort after you eat, okay? So that's where something like gallbladder ND can also be supportive to this process, as you're getting your acid content built back up in your stomach again, and you're getting those proton pumps to work again. So you can use the gallbladder ND. If you're a person that doesn't have a gallbladder, the gallbladder ND is absolutely essential. You should be on that, period, for the rest of your days. It's just going to help you in a big way. And if you don't have your gallbladder, just eat your fats. Eat the majority of your fats between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. 10 a.m. to 2 to 3 p.m. because you're gonna get the liver is gonna dump its bile storage at that time. Okay. And the thing about it is, when you get your gallbladder removed, you can get liver congestion, which makes that bile actually back up into the bloodstream. And because of that, that bile will cross the blood-brain barrier. And that's why you start to see people develop anxiety issues potentially, or depression, or sleep problems, or whatever it is, or they just feel kind of off, or they feel a little crazy. And that can be due to this bile getting into the bloodstream and crossing the blood-brain barrier and creating issues there. So just remember, it's all tied together. Oftentimes less is more when you start thinking about health and well-being. And you start thinking about, my health is really all about the fuels that I ultimately put into my body, whether I'm eating them or drinking them, or whether or not I'm rubbing them on my skin or my hair or using them as makeup. That's just the way you have to start thinking. And when you begin to think that way, it is really pretty incredible how your health just starts to come back. The body we live in is pretty incredible in terms of its ability to heal. So, all right, so I'm done. I will go ahead and take any questions. Anybody have any questions they want to ask? Okay, well, I will let you guys go. Thanks so much for joining me on the calls. Hopefully they're helpful. If you have anything that you'd like me to cover or talk about, please email your liaisons and let them know. And we'll talk to you next week. Have a great day.